welcome back. Today I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to show you how to reload for the Desert Eagle 50 caliber AE or Action Express. And this video is going to be somewhat basic, and then I'm going to go through the steps on how to reload for my viewers out there that maybe aren't familiar with the reloading process. And I think the 50 caliber is a pretty cool caliber to reload for. So this might be a good example for most people to view. Now the 50, I don't have any loaded ammo right now, I shot it all, but the 50 caliber is basically a half-inch diameter bullet. And here in my left hand I'm holding a 45 ACP, and you notice the difference in that. I mean, it's a huge difference physical size wise. Now the first thing we're basically going to do is we have to take this dirty nasty brass here that's been shot, and we got to clean it up. And then once we're done with that, we'll de-prime it. And the primer is basically a cap in the bottom of the brass. And when the firing pin strikes this, it sets it off, makes a spark inside which lights the powder and then pushes the bullet out. So first order of business is to clean the brass and de-prime, resize, which will basically squeeze the brass down to its normal size, because right now it's been expanded when in the chamber and the gun went off. Excuse me, the pressure expanded the brass and swelled this case, so we have to shrink it back down to size because right now it's out of spec. Then once we do that, we'll run it through another little operation that actually bells the outside of the brass so we can accept the 325 grain bullet. As you notice right now, it's too small right now, so it will not fit. That is one big honking bullet right there. And also we'll have to put a new primer in. So this is our new primer. Notice there's no dent in the bottom. So first, like I said, let's clean it. So let's go take a look at the cleaning operation. Okay, so the cleaning process is probably the easiest part of reloading. And I say that only because you don't have to babysit it. You basically throw the brass in, turn it on, and a few hours later, in my case the next morning, it's all nice and clean. And what we're using here is basically a rock tumbler. It's a vibratory tumbler which you put a cleaning media in, and this is basically ground up walnut shells, hulls. And you drop the brass in, turn it on, it starts to vibrate, and the friction just removes all the dirt from the brass. Now there's a lot of gun manufacturers out there that sell polishes that you can pour in here, but they're fairly expensive. And I've found that this car finish right here will do just the same trick. So what I do is I usually pour a little bit in there. Let's see if I can open that up. So we'll just pour a little bit in here, and this speeds up the cleaning process and gives your brass a nice shine to it as well. And this is, this bottle's like $10, and if you bought the gun cleaning stuff specific for brass, it's going to run you $10 for maybe a third of that. So this is a nice money-saving tip right here. I usually run it for a couple of minutes, let that get mixed in with the cleaning media, and then I'll speed up that just for time's sake, and we'll dump in our dirty, nasty brass. Okay, so our brass is run overnight in the cleaner. Let's take a look. Nice and shiny, pretty clean. So now we got to get them out of there. It's kind of a pain in the butt to pick them individually up and empty them. So what you can use is what's called a media separator. And this is just a real inexpensive one I picked up years ago. It's a real simple concept. You just pour it into this, close it up, and roll it, and all the media falls out through the cracks, and then the brass is left behind. Okay, so we got to separate this. We'll open up the media separator, take our stuff, and just pour it in, and then we'll close that up. And to keep the dust from flying around and the media from falling on the ground, I'll just put the lid on, and then we just crank the handle around for a few turns. The more brass you have in there, the more you're going to have to do it. This is just a few brass, maybe 40-50 pieces. It's only a couple of turns is necessary. Open it up. And there's our brass all separated and emptied. Okay, for reloading we're going to use a vintage Lee turret press. The one I have is a 3-die turret press, which means you can put 3 dies in it and just rotate them from station to station. Lee makes a 4-die turret press nowadays, which would be a much better purchase over this one if you were looking to buy something, because this does require 4 dies. Each die serves its own purpose. First we have the decapping, priming, resizing die, if you will. This one here is going to knock out the old primer and squish the case back down to size. Then once I run each individually through that die, then I'll turn it. I'll run the next one, which is the belling die. And the belling die is basically, it flares the mouth of the case just a little bit to accept the bullet. Because right now there's no way you can put a bullet in there once you resize it. So once I do each of those, then there's the bullet seating die, and this is where the actual bullet is put on and then pushed down to the correct depth inside the brass case. And then once I do all of them, then I'll have to put a crimp on it. And this is the crimp die right here. And I'll demonstrate what the crimp die does when that time comes. Alright, now that our brass is all nice and clean and our dies in the press are set up, we're going to decap the primer and resize the brass. And what I like to do is I like to lube up the cases with some just some spray lube. It's this Hornady One Shot. I always use this on my pistol cases. You don't really need to lube pistol cases if you're using carbide dies, but if you're going to be doing a lot of repetitive pulling the lever here, it just kind of makes it a little easier on your body. So I pour them into like an old Tupperware dish I have, and then put a little spray on them, and that's it. Just a real thin case, or thin layer of that lube on there, and then we'll pull one out at a time, set it in the shell plate holder here at the base of the die, or the press, and pops out the old primer, and there we go. Drop that in the bucket and we keep going. Some of these brass cases are kind of munged up around the lip on here, so they don't fit in the shell case very well, or the shell holder on my press very well. It just means they've been reloaded a few times or been dinged up on the extractor or something. But this is the very repetitive work of reloading. If you've seen my video on the Dillon 650, it's a progressive press. Each time you pull the lever, it actually produces a bullet, a completed round rather. But this is essentially a single stage where you have to do everything one at a time. So you may run that piece of brass through 3 to 4 times just to get a loaded round, when in reality you're pulling on the Dillon 650 or any of the progressive presses. Each time you pull the lever, you're making a bullet. But on these single stages, you know, it takes a while. So you have to ask yourself, is it really worth my time to reload if I have a single stage? Well, it kind of depends on how much you're going to reload. In these 50s, they're $45 for a box of 20. So this is well worth your time to reload when the price is that high. All right, last one. All right, so now that we've got our brass deprimed and resized, we're ready to bell it out, which is basically we're going to open up the case mouth just a little bit in order to put the bullet on, because right now we've shrunk it down so much that a bullet will not fit inside the brass. So I'm going to rotate the turret to the belling die,